So, as I'm sure many of you are aware, Activision Blizzard have been having a bit of a tough time of it lately. Oh, woe is Activision Blizzard. You see, what happened was a bunch of their managerial figures and prominent employees were discovered to basically be vile pieces of shit, which I know came as a surprise to everybody, me included. And in particular, among the pieces of shittery were, credible allegations of sexual harassment and abuse, credible allegations of demeaning and degrading women in the workplace, credible data that suggests women in significantly similar roles don't make the same as their male counterparts, perhaps making the California tech bubble one of the few places in the world that the gender pay gap might actually be a real thing. And so, as a result, they've become embroiled in a lawsuit to which, it must be said, their initial PR offensive was really poorly handled because they went with the strategy of, won't somebody think of the big corporations? The government entity, the state entity from California is attacking us, and this is why big corporations are moving out of the state. Oh, woe is us. So they went with that initially, which was followed up by a former Bush advisor, George Bush advisor, not just someone who advises about bushes in general. That's a nice shrub. Not could use some berries on that one. No, the president I'm talking about. During the war on terror, she came out and said, look, I'm a woman, and even though I've only just joined the company this year, I haven't seen anything like that. Therefore, all complaints are invalid, aren't they? And of course, that went over very poorly with the workers. There was walkouts. It was all a nightmare. Now, one of the people who have been named, and I have seen this, by the way, and this is terrible when this happens. One of the people who was named in this, hang on, let me bring up, I want to get this correct. If you go back and you remember the Cosby Suite incident in Kotaku, that was reported in Kotaku. There was basically a Blizzard employee that was caught up in the messages who had the surname McCree, and this was a relatively prominent Blizzard employee who'd been there a while, was well known, Jesse McCree, and so there's been some misinformation that he is a sexual abuser. I noticed on the front page of the Reddit Games subreddit, that's what people were saying. They also said he was a sexual harasser. None of those things are provably true. They're not demonstrably false, but there's no evidence presented that he had done any of those things. Simply put, he seemed to be part of the backslapping drinking culture, and he was in those messages on the Cosby Suite where he said something particularly egregious, which is why it stands out. I'll just bring this up so you can see it for yourself. This was, of course, the BlizzCon Cosby crew text, as, funnily enough, put out there into the public domain by the now fired Alex Afrasiabi. And you can see there Jesse McCree responded to Dave Cossack saying, you can't marry all the girls we bring up to the suite. And Jesse McCree said, you misspelled fuck, you see. So that is a degree of complicity. But equally, you shouldn't accuse people of being sexual predators, not just because, obviously, it's a smear against their reputation, but also, as well, you are detracting from the proper attention being paid to the actual sexual predators. Now, as a result of these reports, obviously McCree is out the door. He's no longer there. And, of course, there was much debate, much discussion about what do we do about this complicated legacy that they leave. And that is, of course, that there is a cowboy character named after him in the game Overwatch. And, you know, when you say a cowboy character, probably one of the better known characters and most preferred characters in the game, certainly a prominent figure in the game. Lots of porn, frankly, has been created around him, which is, let's be real, the only cultural impact Overwatch has had is in the cartoon porn industry. And yes, there is something I find particularly arousing about a cowboy saying it's high noon as he ejaculates. Who wouldn't find that enticing? But that being said, he is still in the game. And the question was, what do we do? What do we do about this name McCree? Because obviously it's named after somebody that did a bad thing. Now, I'm of the opinion that just because a bad thing happens or a bad thing is done or somebody misbehaves, it doesn't necessarily mean that their name, should be tainted permanently, because that would be impractical, wouldn't it? Because a lot of people have popular surnames, you know. For example, I wouldn't want to see popular Jewish comedian Richard Lewis banned from DreamHack because there's a chance him attending might trigger negative traumatic memories among certain Dota players and fans. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that for Richard Lewis, now age 72 or whatever. That seems to be a little bit unreasonable. There are some exceptions that prove the rule. Don't really see the surname Hitler having a resurgence anytime, by way of a for instance. You know, don't really see that coming back. In fact, most people who do have the name Hitler change it. And anyone that tries to name their children Hitler are usually stopped via court order in most parts of the world. That is the one, really. Right? There are some examples, obviously, but in general, I don't think that standard of saying something dismissively misogynistic is enough for erasure. So we are left with a problem as well, just as I say, it's a broader problem. You know, where would we draw that particular line? And so the debate went back and forth. Now, prior to us having the discussion about whether or not we have the discussion about removing the name, there was an incident that really drove the debate. And that was, of course, that there were Overwatch League commentators, and I consider these people to be friends, colleagues, esports victims like the rest of us, you know, just making bad decisions. What they were doing during an Overwatch League broadcast was they refused to say the name McCree. And just to give you a summary, it was Sideshow Gaming and Brencast. Obviously, I think I've done content with both of them. Certainly know both of them. Certainly talked to both of them. And they were calling him the Cowboy over McCree. And this was at the height of the scandal. Now, and this was given a very good response, including my good pal Mitch. This is a good idea, to be honest. And people here, I really appreciate them not saying the cowboy hero's name. And you can see that it related back to the chat log that I showed you. And it's like, look, that week, maybe it's appropriate because you want to draw attention to the negativity that Activision Blizzard are embroiled in. You want to draw attention to the suffering of the people that have had to work under this like awful set of conditions for a while. You certainly don't want to be seen as sort of like being in any way complicit or dismissive of the terrible things that happened. So maybe that week, yeah, you make a point, a little protest of not saying the name. Now, had that become the norm moving forward, I would have said, and sorry guys if you do get linked to this, I would have said that's pathetic. And at that point, it goes beyond a mere protest. It goes beyond, drawing attention to something at the correct time, and essentially becomes almost like a virtue signal, a way to put yourself front and center. And, me, I'm such a jaded old curmudgeon these days. I really struggle with attention-seeking behavior, even though the game that we're all in is to do as much attention-seeking behavior as possible, to obtain as much attention as possible, to make as much money as possible. So, honestly, probably not the best idea, frankly. But anyway, that drove it. That drove the debate. People seem to think, because it was Vogue that week, oh, look, yes, that is a good idea. Blizzard must change the name. And that was, and you can look this up, that was the general consensus, by the way. It's interesting, the consensus has shifted, because now Activision Blizzard have actually done it. They announced it. They said here, a message from the Overwatch team, right? Always good to get those. We built the Overwatch universe around the idea that inclusivity, equity, and hope are the building blocks of a better future. They are central to the game and to the Overwatch team, right? As we continue to discuss how we best live up to our values and to demonstrate our commitment to creating a game world that reflects them, we believe it's necessary to change the name of the hero currently known as McCree to something that better represents what Overwatch stands for. We realise that any change to such a well-loved and central hero in the game's fiction will take time to roll out correctly, and we'll share updates as this work progresses. In the near term, we had planned to kick off a narrative arc in September, supported with a new story and game content, of which McCree was a key part. Since we want to integrate this change into that story arc, we will be delaying the new arc until later this year and instead launch a new FFA map this September. Going forward, in-game characters will no longer be named after real employees, and we will be more thoughtful and discerning about adding real-world references in future Overwatch content. Certainly, though, we'll still throw in vague references to the real political landscape of America and ban people who have the word Trump in their username. This will help reinforce that we're building a fictional universe that is unmistakably different from the real world, and better illustrates that the creation of Overwatch is truly a team effort. Work on these updates is underway, and they are just a part of our ongoing commitment to honest reflection and making whatever changes are necessary to build a future worth fighting for. We know that actions speak louder than words. They certainly do, and we hope to show you our commitment to making Overwatch a better experience in-game and continue to make our team the best it can be. So, just to wade in, the sentiment towards this has been overwhelmingly poor, not because people don't recognise, yeah, you probably should change the name. You'll notice people didn't have as much of an issue with Afra Siabi being taken out of World of Warcraft. The difference, of course, there being that it was a pretty, low-tier NPC, blink and you'll miss it, rather than a central character you yourself play as. But, I think the reason people object is because it's just such a pathetic gesture. It is effectively meaningless, and unfortunately we can see through why you've done it. It's too transparent, especially at this time. And what am I saying? Well, it's too transparent, isn't it? In the spirit of slacktivism, which is all Americans do these days, in the spirit of slacktivism, hashtag activism, if you like, you have to do as little as possible to yield the most, good optics result. And so obviously while they are saying, oh, it's a big deal, we're going to have to write is changing of the name into the story arc, and we're having to delay content because of it. In reality, the changing of the name is nothing. It means nothing. It as a gesture to the people that have suffered at Blizzard. Some people are still there, still going through shit. It means absolutely nothing. It has absolutely zero worth to those people. And honestly, to the player base, we're all concerned about it. You know what we'd like? We'd like to see Bobby Kotick sort of hauled over some coals, made to sweat a little bit. At the very least, since you clearly can't fire this person, who is the tip of the pyramid, is the person that's all responsible for this. We can't do that, can we? We can't have that. We're not going to get that. You threw a bunch of patsies under the bus, and now you're not even talking about that. You put a woman in charge, but you didn't give her full charge. You only gave her partial charge. Again, I see what you're doing, Activision Blizzard. We aren't morons. And so this move is just a pathetic, let's try and generate some good press with a change that costs us very little. And for once, the Overwatch community, and usually they have their purple foot-shaped blinkers on. Well, they didn't this time. They've seen through it. And the response is overwhelmingly negative. Because, well, just in the first instance, as I said, it does nothing. Second, it also has a sort of negative effect if you're Activision Blizzard. I mean, I don't think it's going to necessarily yield the results they think. Because let's just say I'm a casual player and I'm playing Overwatch just as a game. I don't care about Activision Blizzard. I mean, I'm essentially describing the average gamer here, aren't I? I don't care about Activision Blizzard. I don't care about your scandals. I don't care about your share price. I just care about the product I consume. I don't go online. I don't have a Twitter account. I'm not embroiled in any of that shit. I just like to play the game, right? So I log in one day to check out some new content. And you get there, you log in, and they've changed the name of the cowboy. You know, he's called, I don't know, can't even think of a good name they might go for. Barry. He's called Barry, right? And you think to yourself, why is he called Barry? Like, you know, why? And you Google it. And you go, wait, you changed the name because the guy who I assume played some part in designing the character got their name put on it, and he then sent a bad message, one that he assumed would be kept private, and probably was a bit of a douchebag. All right. So there's a reaction to that in that moment. I either now think to myself, God, Activision Blizzard employed some terrible people. Maybe I don't want to support them anymore. Or I think, wow, that's not very based, Blizzard. Fuck you. And maybe you stop playing the game. So it seems to me to be not a particularly smart move, whichever angle you come at it from. I don't see what it realistically achieves. Now, I tried to make that point somewhat satirically yesterday, because, you know, I used to be, in a past life, add this to the list of jobs that people collate. Although the person who is collating the list of jobs doesn't understand beekeeping isn't a job, it's a hobby, but that's fine. But let's just go into the point I was trying to make satirically, because I think people maybe missed it, right? Which it's not a particularly great joke, and many people made the same or similar jokes, but it did seem to go over a few people's heads. Here it is, exclusive, right? And what I've done is for satire to be truly effective, there has to be an aspect where people could believe it's real. So I've done exclusive. Leaked reveal of new name for Overwatch character after Activision Blizzard removed problematic use of McCree. And you can see introducing Epstein. Right? Now, this joke, right, you see. Which, by the way, this was done by Griff. So shout out to him. My idea, my concept. But I can't use Photoshop because I'm a boomer. So, introducing Epstein, right? Now, obviously, the joke here is, somebody said, why didn't you put Jeffrey Epstein? Because that would ruin the joke. The joke is that there are multiple people called Epstein, but obviously because of all the shit he was into, the surname itself is problematic. In fact, I saw a joke on Twitter where there was a journalist whose surname was Epstein, and someone replied with, "You're a disgrace to the Epstein name," which I thought, that's fucking hilarious, isn't it? That's fucking hilarious, because the idea you could be worse than Jeffrey is fucking, that's hilarious. So, and I was thinking about that when I did this because, right, so the joke works this way. First of all, they've replaced the name with a worse name. That's part one of the joke. Part two, it sort of illustrates, actually, that changing a name so there's nothing associated with it is essentially ridiculous. And then, of course, the other part of the joke is Activision Blizzard are incompetent. So they might do this, right? Which is, I think, where people believed it was real. Obviously, I'm not a satirical account. I don't often do satire, but I do banter, and I do straight fire. So, just a shout out as well, in the same way that Gandalf put them horses on the big wave that took out the ring race at Rivendell. This was my touch here. The DKMS on his belt. For those that don't know, McCree, or as he is currently called, Virtual Gaming Cowboy Man. Virtual Gaming Cowboy Man has a belt that says BAMF. Which again has caused much controversy in the oh-so-sensitive Overwatch community, because that stands for badass motherfucker. And so what I wanted to do was have a belt. In the book it was Arwen, but in the movie Gandalf says it was him. So I am going off the movies because I watched them recently. But anyway, I wanted to make a reference to that and wanted to put something that relates to the Epstein into the piece. So I said, why don't you have a belt that has an abbreviation, DKMS, standing for didn't kill myself? Because he didn't, did he? So, there's lots going on there. I think that's a great piece of work. Here's the point, right? Does anybody believe that, the state of things is better as a result of taking the word McCree out of the game? When you have, headlines like this going on at the current moment. With Activision Blizzard, and this was a report, Tech News, by Axios. Hang on, I might actually have to use an archive here because Axios is one of the websites that gets night moded. So we'll turn that off. California have expanded their lawsuit against Activision Blizzard. So for those that don't know, typically these things do come in phases, essentially. You have the initial lawsuit with the initial complaints in. You usually get a response, a legal response from the plaintiff, and then the lawsuit is essentially refined down, so you end up with either more information to substantiate the complaints, you get rid of complaints for which there isn't a lot of substantive evidence, and, you know, on and on and on it goes. So the next wave of the California lawsuit revealed a few things. Let me say. So a copy reviewed by Axios specifically mentions that California's protections against anti-harassment, equal pay, and other equal employment opportunity protections exist for employees and contingent or temporary workers. Throughout the lawsuit, the word employees has now been changed to workers in reference to harassment, sex discrimination regarding pay, and other allegations. The Department of Fair Employment and Housing also says Activision Blizzard has stymied its efforts through NDAs, requiring employees to speak with the company ahead of contacting the DFEH, and its involvement with WilmerHale, a law firm the game maker said will investigate misconduct issues. Let's just address that bit first. I've been trying to explain to people for years that this idea that NDAs are not insidious is a complete fabrication. Because, look, on some level, it is good to agree that your employer, well, anyone in an employer-employee relationship cannot just be saying things that are essentially talking out of school and could be harmful to the business or the employee status or future employment status. I get that, right? But what you have in gaming, what you have in America in general, American corporations, is these outrageous overreaching NDAs that I've been talking about since I found out Riot Games were making anyone who visited their fucking offices sign them. And that still goes on today, by the way. I've been trying to explain to people, these are dangerous. Do not sign NDAs where it is avoidable, right? And of course, the people that were going, well, these are just standard NDAs. That's just boilerplate language. There's nothing to worry about here. All fucking lawyers. They're all lawyers. They get paid to write the NDAs. I wonder if there's a vested interest in saying NDAs are fine. I wonder. Right? An NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, is used for the express purposes of shutting you the fuck up without there being reprisals. You can still talk, but we reserve the right to sue you for it if you do. So you can understand immediately how non-disclosure agreements don't actually work in workers' favour at all. And so, yes, of course, like every other rotten shit company in esports and gaming, non-disclosure agreements ride to the corporate rescue again, don't they? Hey, if you tell anyone anything, you talk to a journalist, you talk to a shop steward, you talk to the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, you'll be in a breach, and it's not our fault, but it will be a breach, and we will have to take it seriously. I guess you shouldn't have signed it. Not to mention, NDAs in America are so fucking egregiously over the top. As I said, like the one at Riot, it's like 3 years after you leave the company, you still can't talk about the shit that went on at the company. I wonder if they could be the very same apparatus these big companies use to get away with so much for so long. Maybe we should be having a chat about NDAs, actually, America. Oh, no, don't worry. Workers' rights bad. Unions bad. Yeah. I know. And then on top of that, they've also brought in WilmerHale. Feel free to look them up. The idea, right, that Activision Blizzard have said there must be an internal investigation. And everyone's gone, yeah, there must be. And we, Activision Blizzard, can't do it for integrity issues. And everyone's gone, yeah, that's right, Bobby. Holy shit, yeah. Yeah, tell him. Maybe you're all right, Mr. Kotick. And then they go, so we'll use a law firm that's known for going into corporations and busting up union practices. And also, we're hiring them and paying them, so essentially they do work for us. And everyone's gone, right. Okay, then. Then, the suit claims that these choices directly interfere with the DFEH's ability to investigate, prosecute, and remedy workplace discrimination and harassment violations on behalf of employees and contingent of temporary workers. And it also says it alleges in part that documents related to investigations and complaints were shredded by human resource personnel in violation of what it asserts is the game's legal obligation to retain them pending the investigation. Now, not a lawyer, but when you enter the discovery phase of a legal investigation, it is a legal requirement that you cannot start shredding documents and deleting emails and destroying phones and altering records. You can't do that because the purposes of discovery is to get to the truth of the matter of what's gone on by having a broad legal protection that enables you to come in and look at these documents without them being interfered with to enable you to do that. And so you can start looking at this in a broader context. It's always about that broad context. And so if this allegation is true, and I as I said, I am inclined to believe the Department of Fair Employment and Housing when they commit to saying these things in legal documents. But maybe they are just lying. Maybe it's all part of an insidious plan. Maybe the communists really did win. Look. If they have done that, that's a very bad thing, because I imagine the documents that got shredded would probably be the ones that would substantiate one way or the other whether or not they ignored the complaints that were sent to HR. Notice in particular, it's human resources documents that have been shredded. Also, remember when they fired the vice president of human resources on the basis that people had complained and said HR didn't take the complaint seriously? I wonder if they'll be going with the rogue employee strategy. A corporate classic. So, when they say in a statement, right, actions speak louder than words. Yeah, they do. And you were shredding documents that might have got justice for people that allegedly in a video game. You were shredding documents that were potentially going to help people make a solid case against you and get the reparations that they deserve. Axios also just generalize some of and summarize some of their additional stories, saying that that they had to work brutal overtime with for little pay. If you were on contract, there was a lot. As you can see, there's a lot of pressure. Quote: "There's a lot of pressure to excel, impress, and move through the ranks as fast as you can before your contract ends, or you're forced to go 3 months without income or find another job. I take pride in what I do, but it feels like it's never enough. We suffer from stress," said another worker, again, assume a short-term contract worker. "We suffer physical ailments. We are overworked and underpaid across the board." Because Activision Blizzard, right, as I told you way back when they laid off 800 people and then had Bobby Kotick go and brag about how it was the year they generated the most revenue in the history of the company, because Bobby Kotick's just such a cool guy. They then were looking to either rehire people back on reduced salaries to do the jobs of the people they just fired, or they just gave people secondments. One of the most insidious things that corporations and big companies do is the secondment. If you don't know what a secondment is, it's when you take basically someone who wants a development opportunity. I'll use all the Orwellian language these companies use. I know, I've used this language myself. in another one of my jobs when I was a beekeeper. So they say, hey, do you want a development opportunity? They appoint you as the manager of something or the head of a project, but your job title doesn't change. Your salary doesn't change, but your working hours certainly change. And so you end up effectively doing two jobs under the guise of it being a development opportunity, and they get the labor for free. They don't have to hire anyone. Then, when you go and you say, hey, the job's opened full time. I saw the opening on the company intranet. I'd like to apply for that. I was the seconded head of that project. And they go, yes, you should apply. And you do apply, and then you don't get the job mysteriously, and they've hired someone externally with none of the direct experience for the job. And they give you, would you like some feedback? And they tell you all the ways you were shit to justify not giving you a promotion. It's great. That's if they even open up the post as a full-time one. So yeah, these corporations are all of the same. They don't give a fuck about you. They will bleed you till you are dry. And they will treat you like shit while they do it. And changing a fucking cartoon cowboy's name just isn't going to cut it, is it? So anyone who's applauding this like a fucking circus seal is a moron. So that was all the news in cartoon cowboy world.